Welcome everyone and to the CALS International Seminar Series. This seminar is being recorded and broadcast on Facebook. We will share the recordings on the CALS International Programs YouTube page and website, and we will email a link to all registrants. I am Adrienne Tucker, the Assistant Director of CALS International Programs. In CALS International Programs, we work to internationalize the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences through opportunities like this International Seminar Series. This seminar is in partnership with CALS SAIGE, which is the Student Association for Interdisciplinary and Global Engagement for all of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences here at NC State. Today, we are very happy to welcome Jaime Adams, who is a Senior Advisor for International Affairs for the USDA. Jaime joined the USDA Office of the Chief Scientist in 2011 as a Senior Advisor for International Affairs, leading international agricultural science and technology issues for the USDA Chief Scientist and Undersecretary for Research, Education, and Economics. Jaime joined USDA in 2004 and has worked on high-level international agricultural issues for over 20 years, spanning policy and technical dimensions, including regulatory, trade, science, technology, and research areas. Her experience includes representing and negotiating on behalf of the United States government at bilateral and multilateral meetings, including G7 and G20, and she was posted at the US Embassy in Afghanistan. Jaime has supported a variety of international initiatives, including high-level foreign and US leadership, including President of the United States, members of Congress, US ambassadors, and US cabinet officials. Jaime is a trained economist, where she received a Bachelor of Science in International Resource and Consumer Economics and Master of Science in Agriculture Economics from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Here, I'll turn it over to Jaime. She will tell us about her story about how she came from rural America to Washington, D.C. with stops in Vienna, Kabul, and Dubai. Thanks, Jaime.
Thanks so much, Adrienne. I'm so excited to be here with everyone today and for the opportunity to speak with you all. And I really look forward to it being a very active conversation and really welcome comments. And so when I had the opportunity to join you today, I thought about ways in which I engage quite frequently, being local. I live in Wake Forest and I frequent the NC State campus quite often and engage with various activities and student groups there. And I think you'll see in the presentation that I'm going to present to you today some reflections and some of the engagement that I've had with both undergrad and graduate students, both those who have spent the entire time in a university and those that have transferred in from community college, such as myself. So really excited about the opportunity again to be here with you today, and again to make it a little interactive if we can, with your share, to put your hand up if you can, and I'll be able to see it in the participant list. How many are currently a student at NC State? If you could do a reaction or a virtual hand up, just so that I know. Great, awesome. And then how many have never traveled internationally? Okay, so quite a few have also not traveled internationally. All right, so that helps me level set a little bit on how much I go into detail and some of the pieces that I'll cover in the presentation. And thanks again so much for the introduction, Adrienne, and I'm excited to tell a little bit of my story about where I started in rural America and so forth. So I'd hope that many of you will come away with these key points after the presentation. It's the central focus as I've reflected on a career path that led me to where I am today. Was not planned. It's really sought out various opportunities over the last 20 plus years. And some of the guidelines that and recommendations and advice that I'd leave you all with, excuse me, is to really always challenge the norm, explore the unknown, learned that feeling uncomfortable is okay. I often, even to this day, when I travel to new places around the world, that first 24 to 48 hours can often feel uncomfortable. Work hard and play hard, but remember that work-life balance is so critically important to your longevity, among many other things. When you do travel, always talk to the locals. Get out, strike up conversations with random strangers. It's amazing what you can learn along the way. Always ask questions. Questions are the key to learning. There's never a stupid question. I know many of us often feel in class or in a work environment, I don't know if I want to ask that question. Never hesitate to ask a question. And then last but not least, and I'm a little biased, having had a full career in the US government, I'd encourage all of you to consider working for the US government. It's not a career path that I knew about in high school, nor did I know much about it during my undergrad, but at any stage in your career, whether you're a full tenured professor, there's opportunities through Jefferson Science Fellows, to just thinking about where you might go after you graduate. There's all sorts of opportunities to work for the US government, and we're always seeking the best and the brightest. So a little bit about my story. I don't often get a chance to talk much about my past. I'm a rather introverted person in that respect. But my story does begin in rural America. I grew up in central Illinois, corn and soybeans as far as the eye can see. I had less than 20 people in my grade school. I had less than 100 in my high school graduating class. I started out in community college. My family had an agreement amongst all of the kids that, let's be honest, you really don't know what you want to do when you grow up, and community college is just as effective and efficient as going to university. So I am a transfer student. I transferred from community college after spending 2 years to the University of Illinois. And then a little bit later on in my presentation, I'll tell you about how I made that decision to go on to get my master's degree. And I know many of you may be considering that as you're going through your undergrad as well. And so I really had no plans to get to where I am today. And so it's, again, a reflection on being open to always challenging the norm. Let's see here. Sorry, there was an open mic. So the first stop, as mentioned in the title, Vienna, Austria. My very first travel overseas in my career was just the start, and really opened my eyes to the opportunity to travel internationally. Was an internship during my undergraduate with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Foreign Agricultural Service at the U.S. Embassy in Vienna, Austria. The gentleman that you see on the screen, Ambassador, now retired, Alan Mustard, is the reason why I'm in the US government. He's the reason why I went on to apply for my master's, to get my master's that summer during my undergraduate. So again, I spent a couple years in community college, transferred into the ag school at the University of Illinois because they took the most applicants in the spring semester. Because I didn't transfer in the fall. I took the leap of faith to go on in the spring because I finished in a year and a half my curriculum at community college. And then I went on to do an internship with Ambassador Mustard at the embassy, and did some extraordinary activities during that summer, traveling all over Eastern Europe. At the time, the internet, there was still that dial-up tone when you had to connect to the internet. Hotmail was the email that you used at the time. And many of the statistics, the agricultural statistics, you still had to go physically in person to get that floppy disk. If you recall floppy disks from another country, in order to understand what was going on with respect to their harvest figures, their planting figures, et cetera. So I had the amazing opportunity to spend a full summer working at the US Embassy, and then a couple weeks to go, Alan looked at me and he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I've really enjoyed my internship. I think I might want to work for the Foreign Service. And the Foreign Service, if you're not familiar, is you have the Civil Service and the Foreign Service in the US government. And the Foreign Service, there are departments and agencies, the primary being the US State Department. You're part of the US government, you're a US government employee in the Foreign Service, mostly if you're overseas working. The US Embassy are staffed with US government personnel, embassies and consulates, and you're part of the Foreign Service. I didn't even know it was a thing. I didn't know it existed. And so I said, tell me more. And he said, well, first, you're going to need your master's. And I said, so right there that summer, I sat down at his desk. He wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I applied for my master's program right there. And through those connections that I maintained with him to this day, he continues to be a good friend and a mentor for me. And he helped me scope my master's thesis that led me back to many years after traveling to Austria to do research for my master's thesis. Then I went on to graduate school. Many people said, well, I don't know, is it a good idea to stay with the same university for graduate school? You already spent a couple years. And I decided, my family was in the area, was going to go ahead and go to the University of Illinois for graduate school, and had spent a couple years in community college. So I didn't spend a full 4 years for undergrad at the University of Illinois. So I went on to graduate school. I took a leap of faith despite, against the recommendation of my undergraduate counselor. I started in the spring semester. And so if there are faculty on here, I again challenged the norm despite the recommendations. They said, how are you going to take all your master's classes out of sequence? So, well, I'll figure it out. I'm not going to sit around for a semester. And so I started in the spring, but it actually worked out pretty well because then I had 2 summers to work on my master's thesis. And I took a lot of core courses outside of the College of Agriculture in that spring semester and started rigorously planning so that I could use that first summer to work on my master's thesis. So going back to those core things that I started the presentation off with, I challenged the norm, and I started my master's and finished my master's then in a 1.5 years because I had 2 summers to wrap up my master's thesis and defended it in the second summer. I also served as a research and a teaching assistant. And so again, I think this is a little out of the norm, probably still out of the norm. Many people said, how can you do both? I had a situation where I was working already and putting myself through school during the undergraduate, and then I needed to make sure that I could continue to pay the bills while I was in graduate school. So I took on both a research and a teaching assistantship during graduate school. And it really helped to open my eyes to a lot of new opportunities along the way. And then, of course, engaging with so many students. So then I graduated college and I spent a couple years in private sector. I worked for an econ firm that primarily represented defendants in lawsuits, doing economic analysis on the statistical value of a human life on an acre of wetland, and a lot of cool stuff. Working for law firms, even though we were an economics firm, taught me to track my time diligently because we had to bill our clients in quarter-hour increments. And so that was really an excellent eye-opening opportunity right out of college. And then prior to that, I spent quite a bit of time working for various ag companies while I was in college in my graduate career, doing a lot of on-the-ground research with test trial plots throughout Central America, throughout Illinois, Indiana, et cetera. And so it was really a great experience. I had a lot of various jobs throughout college before joining the U.S. Department of Agriculture that I've now been with for over 20 years. And so I can say I've been at USDA for 20 years, but as Adrian mentioned in my opening, I've worked across the regulatory, trade, and now the research areas of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've worked overseas. I've engaged with the Department of Defense, State Department, USAID, National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, working across the US government with a multitude of fabulous colleagues, many of whom I call friends. Starting out at USDA, though, I joined a regulatory agency that some of you may or may not be familiar with called the Packers and Stockyards Program. As an economist coming in out of graduate school, and then eventually becoming a confidential assistant, and then moved on to a budget officer position, managing the budget for the agency after doing the other jobs for several years. And again, each opportunity that I took, even though I came in as a trained economist, I was always challenging the norm and asking for more opportunities to learn and expand and ask questions, which led me to then have more opportunities as I continue to advance in my career. And a lot of people don't realize the multitude of positions and opportunities that sit in the government, let alone at the US Department of Agriculture. But there are so many opportunities with the vast amount of responsibility that sits with USDA. So again, what I'm sharing with you is just a slice of, just a slice of what we have at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and I encourage you all to take a look at the website to learn more about the vast opportunity. So I spent quite a bit of time on the regulatory side, as we like to say in USDA, and then I went over to the trade or the foreign ag side of the house. So if you recall, that's where I'd done an internship prior to graduating college, and joined the Foreign Agricultural Service for several years as their chief of staff and senior advisor, which led me to so many travel opportunities. I should say the Packers and Stockyards program has evolved over the years. It became part of the Grain Inspection Packers and Stockyards Administration and has since merged into the Agricultural Marketing Service. So that agency has continued to evolve, but the program itself is still intact. I didn't start traveling for the US government until I joined the Foreign Agricultural Service, traveling internationally, I should say. I did travel, but domestically to see stockyards, slaughter facilities, you name it, for the Packers and Stockyards program. But my next point, international travel is important. And many of you have already traveled internationally, so I know I'm preaching to the choir. The pictures on the slide here are some that I took in Baghdad. The swords are the part of the military parade route that Saddam Hussein used to use as he observed his troops. The picture on the right is one of their statues. It's Aladdin, so the genie and the bottle, etc. And so travel is important. And so I hope over these next few slides, I'm going to just show you some pictures of my travel, where it's led over the years. And hopefully many of you are sitting there thinking, wow, she works for who? U.S. Department of Agriculture. And yes, we do travel internationally. We have people stationed all over the world in U.S. embassies, and even those who are Washington, D.C. based do a lot of international travel. Which leads me to the time I spent over a year working at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan. So under the Obama administration, there was a very focused effort to place civilians, U.S. government personnel and others with the military serving throughout Afghanistan to help provide capacity and other opportunities, agricultural opportunities to grow their economy. So just some of the pictures here on the screen on the left, you can see Secretary Vilsack. At the time, he was our secretary then, as he is now under the Obama administration. His first trip to Afghanistan, I had the opportunity to go with him to Afghanistan. I got the one-way ticket. I flew on the plane over, and then I stayed for well over a year working on various projects. On the right-hand side was the Minister of Agriculture at the time, and we engaged quite frequently in activities not only at the national level, but the provincial level as well. What does Afghanistan look like? It's beautiful. It is absolutely amazing. Of course, there are the more desert portions in the south, but some of the pictures that I took from various helicopter rides throughout the north and the west in particular, Kajaki Dam on the top left, a visual of the mountainous regions that are just amazing and in the north. But then also just the bottom picture there to really show how much agriculture does exist throughout Afghanistan, a very diverse agricultural sector, and lots of opportunity and promise there as well. Couple pictures, yes, there was a war going on when I was stationed there. It was an opportunity that I had to work with the Department of Defense, and met a lot of military throughout my time there, and it was quite an experience. Both those pictures are from inside Humvees, and those days I'll never forget. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity. It was something that I could do at the time of my life, both personally and professionally, to really step out of my comfort zone and ask a lot of questions, and again, challenge the norm and seek out new opportunities. Again, going back to some of those key points, always talk to the locals. I spent time volunteering also while I was working in Afghanistan, working with orphanages, and really just talking a lot to the locals to really understand. And I make it a point, whether you're on a quick business trip somewhere internationally and you have a waiter or waitress that you can speak with, always cracking that conversation to learn about who they are. It's amazing what you can learn through those interactions and conversations. So I always make it a point to talk to the locals, not just the government officials that I'm usually there meeting with, but locals as well. Some of the other opportunities that I had while I was working at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul is welcoming congressional delegations. On the left there, former Senator McCain and many other members of Congress, as well as had the opportunity and the pleasure of meeting President Obama. And he made several trips into Afghanistan during the time. And those experiences, as well as working with my U.S. Embassy colleagues in the bottom right-hand picture there, so many people dedicated so much of their lives to the efforts in Afghanistan. Some of the individuals you see in these pictures had spent over a decade working on various portfolios in Afghanistan, either with the US government or with other nonprofits and organizations. Today, I'm in the office of the chief scientist at USDA. We have the responsibility of coordinating science and technology across the US Department of Agriculture, but also working across the US government. So on a daily basis, I speak with colleagues at the US State Department, USAID, National Science Foundation, NASA, the Department of Energy, all of the network across the US government we're engaging with at USDA. The pictures on the screen are from the G20 meetings in Argentina. So I do a lot of negotiation work through both the G20 and the G7, and that provides an excellent opportunity, again, to travel, experience new places, new activities. It's the only time I've ever had a falcon there in the center picture, and had the opportunity to visit salt flats. Unique opportunities as part of those multilateral visits. It's been a tremendous opportunity, and hopefully something that many of you may have never considered as something that's so cool to be a U.S. federal employee working for the U.S. government, representing the United States and all of our taxpayers overseas in these multilateral environments. And then the last stop, Dubai. And so why do I highlight Dubai? It's the most, my Emirati colleagues are who I talk to on the most frequent basis right now, because I'm the US government lead on the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. And so I've been able to expand yet again into more countries and regions in the world that I haven't yet had the opportunity to talk to those government officials or get involved in those regions in the past. I'm so really excited. And these are just a couple pictures from a trip that I just got back from in February, a spice market there on the left, and the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, there on the right. Why was I in Dubai? Well, I was managing the first government meeting of government partners of the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, or AIM for Climate. Secretary Vilsack, there you can see on the top left picture, along with his counterpart in the UAE, Minister Mariam Al-Mahari. She's the Minister for Climate Change and Environment. Those two individuals are the leads for the US and the United Arab Emirates on AIM for Climate. So we hosted the first AIM for Climate Ministerial with more than 30 government partners that you can see there on the right-hand side of the screen. Individuals from across all of our government partners, of which there are now 40, and several non-government representatives joined us from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and IBM, and several others virtually as well. And I'll talk in more detail about AIM for Climate in just a second. And then today as well, as part of that trip to Dubai, I had the amazing opportunity to visit Expo 2020. In the United States, we often refer to it as the World's Fair, but delayed by the pandemic. It was supposed to happen in 2020. The United Arab Emirates is hosting, it's now in its last week, Expo 2020. So Expo takes place every 5 years in the world, and it has been taking place globally since the 1800s. And it really is focused on showcasing the world's innovations and the work of all of the countries around the world. Each country, if you've ever been to a big international event, maybe where there's booths, a table for each country within a building, the Expo 2020 spanned 1,100 acres, and there was a building for each country, as well as thematic buildings and so forth. So there on the right-hand side, you can see a picture of the US pavilion. In the center there was a 3 or 4 minute moving track that you could take a ride through US history, and it showcased a lot of inventions and talked about how important quantum computing is going to be in the future, videos and other really interesting things. A piece of, you could touch a moon rock, space exploration. A really unique opportunity. There's a virtual page for Expo 2020. It's almost as good as being there. Given the ongoing pandemic, they created a hybrid environment where you can go out and explore Expo 2020 virtually. And encourage you all to take a look. If you just Google, I think it's Expo 2020 virtual. And you can actually go in many of these buildings and tour them either through video or through a 3D experience. What do other opportunities lead you? I mentioned I had the opportunity to meet President Obama in Afghanistan during one of his visits, as we were helicoptered up to a major Air Force base where he was flown in and provided a speech to the troops as well as the U.S. Embassy personnel. But it can lead you down paths I never would have imagined. Sitting in my high school in Central Illinois, am I going to work for the U.S. government? I didn't even know what it meant to work for the U.S. government. I was pre-med focused, but unfortunately those cadaver labs clashed with the job that I had in the evenings. But it led me down a path that I had no clue I would experience. To be able to say that now, 20 years later, I've had the opportunity to meet U.S. members of Congress, U.S. presidents, U.S. secretaries, secretaries of state, secretaries of agriculture, all from a job in the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I would have never been able to tell you this, and it's such a unique and amazing opportunity that any of you could experience if at some point you decide that a job with the U.S. government is for you. The U.S. government is huge, and there are unbelievable opportunities for those who want to be a scientist their entire life, working in laboratories anywhere in the national laboratory system to overseas, or becoming a leader, a manager of researchers in the larger portfolios. The opportunities truly are endless. If you're ever interested in a job with the US government, There on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, before I transition in the deck here to just tell you a little bit more about AIM for Climate, is usajobs.gov. That's the one-stop shop where you'll find all of the jobs that are open within the US government, as well as internship opportunities. The summer interns are coming right around the corner. There's also opportunities to have fellowships, etc. But you can find a wealth of information. I always point this out because so many people that I talk to are not familiar with usajobs.gov. So I know we're running at about half hour. I do want to leave time for questions and answers, but I do want to take a minute and tell you about my newest project. It's one of a million things that I work on as part of my portfolio, managing science and technology international engagements for the USDA chief scientist. But AIM for Climate, Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, has been just an amazing opportunity. There's a video on this next slide, and we did a tech test at the top. It doesn't seem like the sound's going to share through, so I'll be sure to point you to the website. The video is up at www.aimforclimate.org. I'd encourage you to check out the website, follow us on Twitter to stay linked in. But AIM for Climate was previewed by President Biden at his Leader Summit on Climate last year, and then launched by the president and his Emirati colleagues at the COP26, the United Nations Climate Conference in Glasgow in November of last year. And so we spent 6 months last year building this global coalition, and we are really excited to have the president include the initiative in his remarks at COP26 to officially launch it. And as I touched on earlier in the presentation, the reason for my most recent trip to Dubai was for the inaugural AIM for Climate Ministerial that was held at Expo 2020 in Dubai. So what is AIM for Climate all about? Well, the goal is to increase and accelerate agriculture and food systems innovation in support of climate action. We all recognize that the agricultural sector has been often overlooked in global climate conversations, and AIM for Climate is our opportunity to spotlight this sector, which is highly vulnerable to climate change. Considering that over a quarter of the world's population is employed by agriculture, we really need to think about how to enhance the resilience to the impacts of climate change, as well as noticing that the ag sector is extremely relevant to sources of solutions to climate change and is also a contributor to climate change. And how are we going to do that? We really need investment in innovation to expand the opportunities for climate mitigation and adaptation in this sector. And that is really what AIM for Climate is all about, is increasing investments in innovation. The objectives to achieve the goal for AIM for Climate, as I mentioned, is increasing investment. So we're looking to increase both public and private sector investment in climate smart agriculture and food systems innovation. We want to enable coordination, collaboration, and increase cooperation through the initiative as well. We know that resources are limited. A lot of countries around the world and other non-government organizations may want to increase their investment in climate smart ag and food systems innovation, but given ongoing challenges between the supply chain issues that we're seeing, the ongoing pandemic, et cetera, we know that collaboration, cooperation, and coordination is critically important to maximize the resources that are available. So when we say climate smart agriculture, I always like to take a minute and really explain, what do we mean by climate smart agriculture, and especially in the context of AIM for Climate. And it's critically important to understand that we're not just, increasing investment in agriculture research is important, but what we're looking at here is an increase in investment in innovation. And we define that as research, development, demonstration, and deployment. So the entire innovation pipeline. And then we're focusing on climate smart agriculture innovation. And what we mean by that is we're really trying to tackle two problems at once with the same investment. So designing our investment in this climate smart ag innovation towards sustainably increasing ag productivity So we recognize that food insecurity is not going away. The global population is continuing to grow. So we have to produce more with less, making sure that we're mindful of taking care of the limited resources that we have on this planet. And at the same time, using those same investments to not only sustainably increase ag productivity, but also adapt and mitigate for climate change. So we know that the world is continuing to warm, so farmers are having to adapt while facing the needs to produce more to feed the growing population. These are monumental tasks, but also needing to recognize that the ag sector contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. And so how do we create solutions that can address all of these challenges? And that's really the task at hand in increasing our investment in climate smart ag and food systems innovation. Mentioned earlier that we did have the pleasure of hosting in record speed, after only 4 months after launching Aim for Climate, the first ministerial in Dubai. And one of the outcomes, there's quite a few outcomes that are captured on the website in some of our press releases, but one that I wanted to specifically highlight for you all, at the launch at COP26, at the launch of Aim for Climate, President Biden noted in his comments that we had already raised the investment contributions of an initial $4 billion globally. So between government and non-government partners of Aim for Climate, we've already received commitments over the 5-year period of 2021 to 2025 to increase investment in climate smart ag and food systems innovation by $4 billion. And we're seeking to double that by COP27, which will be hosted by Egypt in November later this year. And so we've got our task ahead of us to both work with our government partners to increase their commitments, but also on the non-government side, and recognizing the role that public-private partnerships play in achieving this goal. So I just wanted to take a moment to really share with you a little bit more detail on Aim for Climate. And again, I'd encourage you to go and visit the website and take a look at our Twitter feed. We have quite a few events that are coming up, including Aim for Climate ideations that'll be hosted by the UN Foundation on critical areas of innovation that we're hoping to bring public-private partnerships around: methane reduction, emerging technologies, smallholder farmers in low and middle income countries, and then agroecological research. And so those 4 webinars are up on the Aim for Climate calendar. They're open to the public. And so we'd very much welcome all of you to consider joining those events as well. And so that brings me to the end of my presentation. And I hope that, throughout the presentation, those core points that I shared with you at the beginning really resonated, and to give you an eye into just one person working in the federal government, of all places, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and all the opportunities that exist within the federal government, no matter where you are in your career. We have tenured professors who join the federal government for Jefferson Science Fellowships, the AAAS fellowships, to internships. We have so many opportunities, even if you just want to experience it just for a small time during your career path. I'd encourage you to consider those opportunities. And I would love to have conversations with anyone who might be interested in learning more. So with that, I'd be happy to take some questions if anyone has any. I'll turn the floor back over to Adrian.
Thank you, Jaime. That was wonderful. We don't have that big of a group, so you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask Jaime a question directly, or you can type your question into the chat and I can read it aloud to her. So the floor is open.
Hey, Jaime, great presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I'm a professor and extension specialist here and train graduate students, and it's really nice to tell them about a new career path that I hadn't known about before. So I really appreciate you doing that. And wanted to know how you are. I think you said you lived in Chapel Hill when you started out. How are you able to live there and do this job? And then are there any advantages or disadvantages living where you do versus living maybe closer to the center of action in DC?
Yeah, absolutely. And my pleasure, Dominique, and thanks for that. I really appreciate the opportunity again to talk to so many that may not know that this is an opportunity that exists for career. I sit in Wake Forest, so I'm a remote employee. I've been a remote employee of USDA since 2013. Working an international portfolio, it lends itself pretty well. There are obviously positions in the federal government that just don't work as well. Obviously we have, for example, at USDA, we have meat inspectors. We have, from the U.S. Forest Service, we have firefighters. And there are a lot of jobs where you have to be there, you have to be hands-on, that we're unable to go remote during the pandemic. But if I have to say, within USDA and under Secretary Vilsack's leadership, really leaning into what does the workplace of the future look like. We've spent 2 years remote. Many USDA employees have been working from their homes by no choice. I was one of the few who I was actually remote, so everybody came to my world when the pandemic started. Working internationally, outside of the travel, I'm often already on the phone or on video with foreign colleagues, so it works quite well. It takes a little bit of effort, especially I've now gone through a transition between 2 different administrations. There are some colleagues that I've never met in person that I've worked with for 5 or more years. And so really reaching out to them, having those virtual coffees, really engaging does take a bit of being more proactive that would have occurred a little bit more naturally in an office environment, in a meeting room, or coming across someone in the cafeteria to get food. I've been remote now almost 10 years, and I'd say the U.S. Department of Agriculture did a full evaluation to determine which positions now can be offered remote. And I think it's a way of thinking that is really forward-leaning across the federal government, especially with the cost of living in Washington, D.C. and the immediate area. It opens up the talent pool opportunities. So we have individuals who are remote all over the United States now, and being a little bit more competitive when we go for more for new employees. And I believe now on USA Jobs, the positions are designated, whether or not remote or telework. At USDA, telework is up to 4 days a week you can work from home. And so those are all new opportunities that everyone is embracing now, much more readily post-pandemic.
Thank you. And we have a hand raised. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me, Adrienne?
I certainly can, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you, Jaime, for your nice presentation. This is MD Masud Rana from Bangladesh Agriculture University, Bangladesh. Thank you so much for your informative presentation. I am particularly interested in climate smart agriculture practices that you have talked earlier in your presentation. Can you please share me the mode of adoption of climate smart agriculture practices in the developing countries? Those are climatically vulnerable countries, and especially the smallholder or marginal farmers of those countries who are mostly affected, and the agricultural productivity is mostly affected in the developing countries like Bangladesh or in the subcontinent. Do you have any particular study or experience about the level of adoption of this climate smart agriculture practices for climate change mitigation and adaptation? Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome, and thank you for joining. And you said you're joining us from Bangladesh, is that right?
Yeah, I'm from Bangladesh.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for taking time to join us. I know that the time difference is quite late there, so appreciate you joining. And I encourage you to definitely visit the website at aimforclimate.org. There's a lot of information out there, and in particular, there's a webinar that's coming up on smallholder farmers in low and middle income countries, and thinking through opportunities for innovation sprints in that area. So I know that there will be a lot of information shared during that time on that particular topic with respect to climate smart agriculture. And I mean, there are a lot of opportunities for mitigation and adaptation, especially for smallholder farmers. And it takes a lot of different shapes, whether it's various approaches or practices or different inputs. And so I'd be happy to have a further conversation with you. I just wanted to quickly here find the particular event so I can drop it in the chat for you. This is the link to directly to the event that will be hosted on the 27th of April on innovation sprints, and then the link to let me see, I'm going to put this in the chat for you, to the events calendar that you can see all of the events there. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities and promise that already exist, as well as new ones on the horizon. And that event there would be a great opportunity for you to plug in and learn more.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And the next person in line for questions, I believe it's Johanna Bingham. If I pronounce the name right.
Oh, yes, thank you. That's correct. Thank you so much for your presentation. I found it very informative. I have a question about working for the government and also doing consulting work. Is that allowed, or do you usually have to, is it a conflict of interest and you usually can't consult other companies, or what would be your stance on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. One that's probably best suited for each individual circumstance for Office of Ethics. So each department and agency has an Office of Ethics. Then those personnel that we go to quite readily are those that keep you out of trouble. Make sure that you're not violating any parts of the U.S. Constitution through being a federal servant. And it's very interesting. And what you can and can't do when you're a federal employee is very different from the private sector. And there's all sorts of rules and regulations that govern those particular interests. And ultimately, what you can do in your official capacity versus what we call your personal capacity are defined based on your job and the overarching rules and regulations. And so each circumstance is very different. And so each department and agency has a process to put every request in. So it really, there's not unfortunately a blanket answer. So generally it's very much to those detailed specifics. You can obviously be a hired consultant or a contractor for the US government. But once you're a federal employee, for example, there are many situations where you can go teach a course at a university. You can serve in various other personal capacities that have nothing to do with your official position. But to stay above board, every opportunity that an individual has, there are processes to fill out various paperwork and so forth to have it reviewed by ethics officials within the U.S. government. Good question, Joanna.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. The next person in line for a question is Eileen Doolin.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come speak. Two rather quick questions. First, have you ever done any work with the World Food Program?
Yes, we work, the U.S. Department of Agriculture works with the World Food Program, though a lot of the activity with the World Food Program is led by USAID, also a part of course, part of the U.S. government, our U.S. Development Agency. And so we have had a lot of interaction with the World Food Program. I had some with the, when I was in the Foreign Agricultural Service. We do the McGovern-Dole School Feeding Program is a program run by the Foreign Agricultural Service, and they have periodic interaction with the World Food Program through that. When I heard you ask the question first, I thought in my mind, I heard World Food Prize, which is separate and distinct based out of Des Moines, Iowa. So I had to pause there for a minute. But yes, the US government broadly and at USDA, we have interactions with that UN agency.
Very cool. So I'm a junior right now at NC State, and that's always been of interest in mine. So any advice for while I kind of finish up my undergrad, how to get involved or learn more about that?
I'm not familiar with specific opportunities, but I'm sure there are intern opportunities. Most of the UN agencies are always looking for various interns. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. If you want to reach out, I have some close contacts, more so in the UN Food and Ag Organization, but they're one big happy family there. So it shouldn't be too hard to find some opportunities.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next person in line for questions is Amanda Manillo.
Hi, thanks so much for your talk. I was curious, does the US government, or how does the US government prepare you to do this work internationally? Are there, I'm trying to think, like, how would you prepare for living in a different cultural setting? How do you prepare for being around a different language? What kinds of things do they do to help you with that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Amanda. I would say if you end up in the Foreign Service has an entire curriculum to prepare you, your family, if you're going to move with your family to an overseas location. They have a very robust curriculum to bring in even the application process to apply to become a part of the Foreign Service. Is a multi-step process. There's written, there's oral, and then once you become a member of the Foreign Service, with each location that you'd go to throughout the world, you would be provided the opportunity for language training. There's the Foreign Service Institute that provides a multitude of courses and a full curriculums for Foreign Service officers throughout the US government, as well as opportunities for training for civil service as well. But I'm part of the civil service. Foreign Service officers, that's a whole nother career path in the US government, and they're required to rotate overseas throughout their career. And they're the individuals that are working at our US embassies and consulates all over the world. So they usually spend somewhere between 2 and 4 years at each post, and then rotate back in through headquarters periodically. It's a really cool career path and lots of opportunity there. For civil service, a lot of it is experience. There's a lot of training opportunities. And, as you work through your career in an international career path within the US government, there are a variety of opportunities and training that they provide you throughout to make sure. And you're usually working with senior officials as well, who have more experience and can pass all of that great knowledge on as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And next in line is Victoria Yell.
Hi. So thank you so much for your talk and for being here. And so I'm a PhD student in plant biology, and my research is related to bioenergy rather than like food production. And I'm looking to pursue a career with some, governmental organization. So my question is, like, how much is the USDA doing with like energy crops right now, or is that mostly DOE, or is there just like a lot of nuance and change going on right now between those two or more?
Well, we actually have an office that has part of its responsibility on bioenergy. So the remit for USDA spans food, feed, fiber, and fuel. And so there's definitely a lot of opportunity for someone who wants to have a career in bioenergy at USDA. We work very closely with the Department of Energy on a multitude of activities, including most recently a Sustainable Aviation Fuels Challenge. So there's, and I would say even at the National Science Foundation, NASA, I mean, there are a lot of agencies and departments across the US government. I think if you would probably go out to usajobs.gov and just put a keyword in like bioenergy or biofuel, you'll see a lot of positions open up in that search function. And then I think that would give you a really good taste of all the opportunities that might be out there for you.
Awesome, thank you. And
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
one last note, I put my club's information in the chat for people who saw that, and it is a graduate student organization, but we are very welcome to undergrads as well. Just wanted to put that out there. All right, thank you.
That's awesome.
And we had one question in the chat saying, can international people apply? Are work visas available for, I guess, for the USDA positions?
Yes, there's a variety of opportunities for both dual citizen and foreign citizens as well, and those take different shapes. We do a lot of scientific exchanges with others, and we often have research collaborations directly with foreign government partners. And I would be remiss if I didn't also mention the AAAS Science Fellows, and that is run separate from the US government, but the US government brings in a lot of AAAS Fellows. And so there are definitely, that's also one of the opportunities that foreign nationals would have as well to participate in the US government. Different jobs have different requirements. You know, for example, if a security clearance is required or not, and different hiring authorities exist across different departments and agencies. So it's hard. There's not a blanket yes or no answer, unfortunately, to many questions. And it really is position dependent. But there's so many different opportunities out there to explore. And let me see here. Was there another comment in the question in the chat there, Adrian?
It was just someone saying that they had to leave, and thank you for your time.
Great. I'm going to also drop in the chat the link to AAAS as well. Across the US government, there are opportunities for AAAS fellows to come in, I believe for up to 2 years, sometimes longer, depending on the department or agency. So it's another way for STEM professionals to have a kind of a multiple experiences, both through AAAS and then as a fellow, AAAS fellow coming into the US government.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your time. This was very informative, and it was really insightful to see all the work that you've done. And I think everyone's really enjoyed it. So I'm glad that we have it recorded for other people who have not been able to see it or can go back and review it. So really appreciate your time, and we look forward to working with you more in the future too.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I see Jose is on camera as well. Adrian and Jose, thanks so much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Jamie. This was fantastic.
Thank you. All right. Have a nice rest of your morning, evening, afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.